Good morning, children. It's so good to be with you again. As you know, my name is Miss Karple and I am a private detective. And as you might remember, I am at the moment investigating a very serious crime. And that crime is the death of Jesus Christ. And as you know, I've been interviewing key witnesses. And the last time we spoke, it was about my interview with Mary and Martha. And this time I want to introduce you to my witness. And he was a very, very important man in Jerusalem when Jesus was there at Passover. And his name was Pilate. He was the Roman governor who was over the whole of Jerusalem. He was the top man. And he had a very important place to play in the death of Jesus. And so I asked him for an interview. And guess what? He agreed. I was very surprised, but he did. And I'm going to tell you now what he said to me. He said, when I first met him, excuse me, I'm just letting my cat in. Come on then, quickly. That's Lily, that's my cat. Anyway, let's get back. Okay, so Pilate, when I first met him, he said, I asked him if he remembered Jesus. And he said, he didn't say anything to start with. He just hung his head like this. And I wasn't sure if he'd gone to sleep. But after a little while, he said, yes, I do. And he was very somber. And I said, oh, okay. Could you tell me a little bit about it? And again, he went very quiet. And then he just poured it out. And he told me all that had happened from his perspective. And this is what he said. He said, yes, I do remember Jesus. He said, I still have bad dreams about that case. You see, I was. Theoretically, I was the person who sent Jesus to his death. But I wasn't really. But I guess I did have the power to change things, and I did nothing. You see, they brought me to Jesus, the Jewish leaders. It was Passover time. And they were angry with Jesus. And they had trialed him in their own little council that they have. But of course, they don't have very many powers. And so they brought him to me, wanting me to sentence him to death. And I asked them, well, what crime has this man committed? And they said, well, he has stirred up the crowd in Jerusalem. He's told people not to pay their taxes to Caesar. And worst of all, he says that he is the Christ. He is a king. You know, I looked at the Jewish leaders and I saw their faces and they were angry and they were distorted. And I knew, because I knew Jesus, I'd heard of Jesus, everybody had heard of Jesus in Jerusalem. And I heard that, and I knew that the leaders, the Jewish leaders and priests were jealous of Jesus because he had a following. And I knew there was bad blood between them. And so I knew what their motives were. They were not pure. Anyway, I said to Jesus, so are you the King of the Jews? And he just looked at me. That look, I will never forget. He looked at me and just said something like, you say that I am. And then the Jewish leaders started shouting accusations at him. One after another, they were shouting, and all the time Jesus just remained silent. And after a while I said, look, stop. I cannot find any fault in this man. I'm going to release him. And the crowd went mad. You cannot release him. He's been causing so much trouble all over since he left Galilee. And I said, Galilee? He comes from Galilee. And they said, well, yes. And I said, well, then that explains it. He shouldn't be coming under me. He should come under King Herod, because King Herod rules Galilee. And he happens to be in Jerusalem. So I thought, well, there. Whew, that's a bit of a relief. I can pass him on to King Herod and let him decide. So I did. And I don't know what King Herod said to him, but anyway, he sent him back to me and said it was for me, because we were in Jerusalem, to decide what to do. And then I had an idea, because I could feel the crowd were really, really looking for trouble. And I was thinking, how am I going to give justice here? Because that's what I wanted to do first and foremost. But I knew that the crowd wanted me to sentence Jesus to death. And I remembered that on the time of the Passover, I'm allowed to let a criminal go. It's one of those rules. And I thought, that's what I can do. I can use that rule. So I had Jesus and 3 other criminals. The other 3 had been sentenced to death. And I looked at those 3 and I saw Barabbas. And he was a bad man. He had really, really caused a riot. He had murdered people. And so I said, well, you have a choice. Either let Barabbas go or let Jesus go. And I thought, surely they will choose Jesus. Because what has he done that is so bad? I cannot find anything in what they say that deserves death. And would you believe it? They shouted Barabbas.